Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Debt Collection 101. So, this is part 3 of our 4-part series with Mary Shores talking about all things consumer experience. So, in our first 2 videos, you by now have learned about how to develop emotional intelligence and the importance of ongoing training. So, if you haven't watched those videos yet, we highly suggest that you go back and watch those before you watch this so that you can have a complete understanding of what we're going to be talking about today. And those 2 videos will be linked above. But today we're going to be talking about empathy and creating connections with consumers. So we're so excited to welcome back our guest, Mary Shores. And I'm also joined by our customer success manager, Ashley Campanella. So thank you both for being here today. So we're going to start off with this question. Can you explain, Mary, why understanding consumer experience and intentional training are the foundation for empathy?
Yeah, I love that question. And thank you so much, Emily, for the video. I hope everyone is enjoying the series. And I think today we can go a little bit deeper to understand a basic concept of mine. I love it so much. I actually just ordered coffee cups with this on it, and it says, connection is currency. So just think about that for a second. What if our ability to make a connection is the true currency? Meaning that the more you're able to make connection, the more revenue you will have. It's such a simple concept, and yet it's like, well, how do we get there? So understanding the consumer experience, understanding what they're going through is going to be the magic secret of how we create that connection with them. And beyond that, it's really about, well, those are nice words, right? And it's important to understand, how do we actually do that? So the first thing is through simple tactics, such as listening to be informed, listening to respond versus react, and taking that 2-second pause to know that the way we respond to what the consumer just said is going to make or break the call. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is that we all have emotional needs. And the number one emotional need is to feel heard and understood. So if the consumer shares something with us that's on the level of something unpleasant, maybe they've just lost their job, and we kind of gloss over that and just say, well, I understand, but we need to talk about this debt. That's not empathy. Okay. So just because we said the words, I understand, that's not true empathy. So we have to really take that in on that micro level, that one moment in time where the consumer just said something to us, letting us know that on their side of the world right now, things are a little difficult. And how we respond to that is the most important thing. And we need to respond in a way where they can check the box in their mind that they have been heard and understood, so that they can move on in the conversation.
Yeah, and the beginning of a call is really going to set the tone for the entire call. So, what advice do you have for collectors beginning a conversation in an empathetic manner, given that many consumers will probably have a stigma already in their minds when they do call?
That's such a great question. And I'll tell you, I've been training people on collections and, lots of other topics for many, many years. And when I'm training on specifically communication, one thing I hear over and over and over again from participants is how challenging it is to be empathetic to someone who is screaming or cussing or just generally behaving badly. And so, if we take a second right there to understand that because we're human beings, when someone's coming at us aggressively, our tendency is to meet them at that same energy. Right. So that's just human nature. That's not because we're debt collectors. It's not because we're bad people. It's because we're human beings. And when we feel like we're being attacked, we need to protect ourselves. And the way we protect ourselves is meeting that same level of aggression. Okay. Nobody is doing any of this on purpose, especially not on the consumer side. But when we understand that the way the consumer is behaving is, and the way that they're speaking to us is more related to how they feel about the debt and nothing to do with us personally, then we can understand that the next thing we say, which is supposed to be the validation, is non-negotiable. Okay. It's very difficult to get over that hump. It's very difficult to be kind and compassionate to someone who's yelling at you. And yet at the same time, it's crucial because it's the only thing that's going to change that call around. I think that I may have wrote a whole blog on this, but it's really about the secret to collections. Part of it is doing the opposite of what the consumer expects, because the consumer comes into the call with like a built up expectation of how that call is going to go, right? And that might be based on what they see in the media. It could be based on, other bills that they've had. And so if we can just sort of massage a way to do the opposite, so that way in their mind that they've built up in their mind that we're going to treat them, what if we do the opposite? Like, what if we really become their advocate and their ally more so than their enemy? And the magic lies right there, is to understand like what is creating those allies and what is creating those enemies.
That's great advice. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. One of the best things I learned over the course of my career is not to take things personally, because very little actually has to do with me. So I'm sure it's a lot harder when you have someone yelling at you, but it's good to make that distinction that it's not necessarily about them as the collector, and that will help them. So I know you touched on this earlier with speaking about how just saying I understand doesn't mean that you're showing empathy, but can you go over some other common pitfalls that might prevent creating connections on the collector side, and then maybe just on the consumer side as well?
Sure. So I think that one of the things is the use of negative language. So negative language is very triggering to all people. Again, this is about neuroscience, so this is universal to all of us. But we know that when we put participants in an MRI machine and we subject them to negative words, the punishment and the consequence center is what is activated in the brain. Now, we also know that there are some pretty common human fears, and the number one fear is poverty. And so when you kind of put those two concepts together, where the number one fear is poverty, and that negative words are going to put us in this consequence and punishment center of the brain, it kind of makes sense why these conversations are uncomfortable. And so some of the pitfalls, beyond it's just like calming those consumer reactions, right? If we take that a step further, it would be anticipating the needs of the consumer and having some solutions prepared. And so that we're talking to them about their options more so than we're talking to them about the consequences. So in the collection industry, there's this tendency for it to feel very punitive. And what I mean by punitive is like it's consequence and punishment based. Well, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. And so, one of the things that I like to talk about is, creating an atmosphere of opportunity for the consumer. Would you like to take the opportunity to pay this account prior to it being placed on your credit report? There's just a way you can change up your words that makes the situation softer in a way. And so, really one of the pitfalls is that the collector needs specific training so that they know how and when to respond and with what level of like tonality and, what words they're going to use for that response, because there's certain objections and stalls that probably happen every single day. And what I find is that the consumer experience can be very inconsistent. So if you talk to 5 different collectors, you might get 5 different pieces of information and none of them match. And so if I'm a consumer, am I going to trust that agency? Absolutely not, right? So that's one of the pitfalls. And the way that we can get over that pitfall is to get real clarity around how we want our consumers to respond, or how we want our collectors to respond to consumers. Almost like I feel like me as the owner of my agency is the voice speaking through the megaphone of our calling system to be who is actually talking to that consumer. And if one of my collectors is talking to a consumer differently than I personally would, that's not good. We can work on that. We can get way better in that area.
Yeah, it's definitely top-down initiative, who the leadership is setting the tone for the conversations that collectors have, I think, because if they feel that pressure from leadership to just like get the money, then they might be prone to be more harsh, but setting the tone for wanting to have them make connections first, I think will help change their mindset to be more empathetic.
Yeah, and stay tuned for video number 4, because in video number 4, we're going to talk about what Emily just touched upon, is those mixed messages that collectors often get from leadership.
Awesome. We're getting down to kind of the end here. I think this question is perfect for anyone watching. I think this is kind of the nitty gritty and what people are looking for. So if you can give some of the viewers what actionable practices collectors can start to do to develop empathy and drive connections.
Yeah, so first, let me give you 4 brief things. So first, we already mentioned about the number 1 emotional need is to feel heard and understood. So believe it or not, and this is you can practice this tonight. So, after you watch this video, the next person you talk to, just say to yourself, I'm going to listen to them no matter what they say. And then after you listen to them, I want you to simply say, like, hey, I heard you. Like, I get you. I heard you. I understand. And just kind of see how that changes up that conversation. Okay, so that's that first piece. And then the second thing is really about learning how to eliminate as many negative words as possible. So in the Collection Advantage program, we have a do not say list. And the list of words that we don't say are no, not, can't, won't, however, and unfortunately. So just changing up and it's not even because you're really eliminating the words. Okay, but you'll notice, so an actionable thing you can do right now today is just in your mind, start paying attention to how many times you say the word unfortunately. And whenever I say this to someone and then I talk to them like a couple weeks later, they're really like, let me tell you something. I say that all day long, all day, every day. Okay. But if you look up the definition of the word unfortunate, it's really not pleasant. So we just need to eliminate that word. The next thing is learn to talk in terms of solutions instead of consequences. And the best way that we can do this is by really understanding to talk about what you can do for the consumer instead of what you can't do. So if the consumer asks you for something, don't say, no, I'm sorry, our policy is we can't do that, that's illegal, just don't go there. So instead say, I can completely see your concerns. I have great news for you, or the good news is I can do XYZ. So it's really massaging to where you're avoiding saying what you can't do and then replacing that instead with what you can do. Now, I know what I'm saying is simple. I want you to know that when you actually go to do it, it's really, really awkward. So I'd love for you to check out my website, maryshores.com, because I have all kinds of blogs on how to do this and would love to help you out in any way.
Those are great tips. And I think the people that are watching this are going to start doing this. And I'm in sales. So from experience, starting anything new or out of your comfort zone definitely is hard to do. And it's very flustering, but it's worth it. Like we've changed things here at Arbite and I was like, I can't do that. And then I try it and I'm like, that actually worked.
Yeah, I think especially if it elicits a positive response and you start to see the more human side of the person you're on the phone with.
Mhm.
And I think, sales follows all of the same mindset. So everything that we've said today, Ashley, even though it is about collections, I think every single one of these aspects will absolutely help someone in sales as well.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Great. So the last question we have is where can people get in touch with you to make sure that they stay on top of everything that you're putting out on this topic?
Yeah, well, I'm very, very excited because we have a couple of products that we have. We are offering the Collection Advantage program. This is for agencies that they can, get a whole company-wide training. And then we're also just rolling out a brand new product, which is the Communication Code Special Collectors Edition. So this is something designed for collectors, and you can find me on my website, maryshores.com. My very favorite social media is LinkedIn. So if we're not already connected on LinkedIn, please find me and send me a connection request. I would be happy to interact with you. And of course, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all the places.
Perfect. So maryshores.com. And stay tuned because we are going to be finishing this series with part 4. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Thank you, Mary, for everything. This was awesome. Thank you for all of these tips about how to develop empathy in a very practical way.
Thank you, ladies.
All right, we'll see you in part 4.